Who do you want to be in life? A founder of a billion-dollar company? A successful actor? An Ironman triathlete? An active member in your community? Or a good parent to your kids? In any given point in our lives, there is a vision of who we want to become and who we are today. In between stands a process and a journey. Hi, I'm Shang, and on this channel, I share ideas and tools that help us become the best versions of ourselves. Today, I want to show you how to create a mind map of this journey, and in the process, expand out the milestones to get there, and the immediate next steps that we can turn into actionable 2-week sprints. All right, let's dive in. In previous videos, I've introduced the funnel of goals framework, which is a hierarchy of processes that brings our aspirations into actionable steps. Check out the links below for a more in-depth explanation of this concept and what to do after you've made this bucket list mind map. Today, we're gonna focus on the top of the funnel, the bucket list. If you're not familiar with the term, it's often used in a connotation of the things that you want to do before you kick the bucket or before you pass away or die, right? So this could be deep sea diving or doing Everest Base Camp. It represents the collection of lifetime achievements and identities and the person that ultimately we want to become in life. The most important part of this level is to ask yourself who you want to become and why you want to become that and who you're inspired by. Because ultimately, these are the things that's going to keep you going on this journey and what you're going to be measuring yourself against. For example, if you want to start a restaurant, you should be asking yourself, why is it that you want to start a restaurant? What inspired you? Who inspired you, right? Is it because that you want to share part of your culture with the world? Is it because you want to show off your cooking skills because all your friends basically say that you should? Or maybe you're inspired by a documentary, an influencer, or your parents or your family or what have you, right? So these are all the things that it's really good to write down and keep in mind. Why does this belong in your bucket list? Why is this a lifetime achievement for you? So, and these ideas, these concepts are the things that you're going to be going back to again and again, especially when the journey gets long and tough. And also, I think, it's always good to remember why you're starting something, why you're on this journey, and then create metrics around it. So if you actually want to make people happy, it's very easy to get caught up in, let's say, the revenue and the turnover and everything, and then forget the fact that you did it for that reason in the first place. So definitely keep those in mind, and that is the number one thing to do with this level or this step of the funnel of goals. All right, so now we're finally getting into the mind mapping. And there are 4 steps to create a mind map like this. So don't be intimidated by how complex it is. It is actually something that is pretty simple to make in just 4 steps. So the first step to create kind of, that mind map structure, which is I'll put under the first child notes, my aspirations, right? These are the bucket list items. So for example, if I want to become an influencer, an Ironman triathlete, or become the founder of a $100 million startup, that's the first step. The second step is to identify and write out why you want to, do these things, what we talked about. So for example, an influencer could be impact, community learning. Ironman is like fitness or self-esteem or identity. Doing a startup could be status, wealth, or impact, what have you, right? I've only put a simple word here to represent those reasons, but I highly recommend you actually writing it out as well. It definitely helps narrow those reasons down. And then the third step is to expand out all of the components, all of the steps that it will take for you to achieve these things, right? These identities. These are basically the building blocks into sub-child nodes, like, for example, Ironman, half Ironman, triathlon, right? We'll go through all of this in a bit. And then keep on doing this until you get to the micro building blocks. These are like the immediate actions. If you were to start on this journey tomorrow, what kind of steps are you going to take? That's the level of granularity that we want to get to, that I'm expecting essentially from this mind map. The fourth step is to color code it. And as you notice, I've got long term in blue, medium term in dark orange, and then the short term in green. And the pattern that you'll see is that the closer you are to the center, which is your long-term aspirations, that's where all the blue things are, and the further you go, that's where the green things are, and that's more short-term and actionable. Those are the 4 basic steps to create this mind map. And a 5th step here is kind of outside the scope of this particular video, but I've made like 3 other videos on this topic, which is actually turning these into like the medium-term goals into Kanban boards in Notion, which is a tracking mechanism and project management tool, as well as turning your short-term goals and steps into actionable 2-week sprints. Definitely check out the links below if you're interested in what to do with this mind map after you've made it. All right, without further ado, let's go through one example first. I love Notability for this reason. Let's pick those settings. Let's go down here. And I'm gonna start with, let's say, bucket list, right? So let's make that first. Let's bring it over here because we need more room. Definitely give yourself plenty of room here. I think either start off with like a large piece of paper, or a notebook, or if you're on one of these apps like Notability, you can just like shrink and move things around as needed, right? Well, the example I'm gonna do is Ironman Triathlete. If you're not familiar with Ironman, this is like one of the hardest like long distance events that you can do. It's basically a run, a cycle, a bike ride, and a swim, and all of them are just as hard as the run, which is a marathon, right? And it's pretty hardcore for the most part. So Ironman is going to be my goal right here, the long-term aspiration. In order to achieve that, it's probably going to be doing a half Ironman. Fortunately, they have that for mere mortals like us. In order to do a half Ironman, you got to be able to do a triathlon first. Let's list that out as well. And then the next one is going to be, well, what are the components of a triathlon? The triathlon, as I mentioned before, is a run, a bike ride, and then finally, a swim. A run, for example, a worthy goal for that might be a marathon, right? If you can't do a marathon, then, well, technically you can still do a triathlon. It's not that long, but for the purposes of this, let's put a marathon here, right? Maybe it's for a half marathon or something. So in order to do a marathon, you can sign up beforehand for a half marathon just to see that, your knees are not gonna like die, or that if you hate running, maybe you don't want to do this, right? So a half marathon is a good kind of like, gauge for that. So in order to do a half marathon, you want to probably get on a training plan. A training plan will then involve, daily and weekly runs. So literally, if you were to, become an Ironman in like 5 years, the next immediate step for you to do tomorrow or today is literally put on your running shoes, or even buy running shoes, right? If you don't have that should be another step. Assuming I already have that, right? Let's say buy running shoes. That's going to be a step in itself, right? These are the things that you can do tomorrow. For biking, you could either do, let's say, bike packing, which is a pretty fun trip. It's like, going on a backpacking trip on a bike, let's say with your friends. That's a multi-day thing or overnight. The other one that you could do for biking, or to see if you can do it, is a century. A century is a 100+ mile ride, and it's pretty hard, regardless of elevation. I've only been able to do this once in my life, and hopefully I can do it more often, right? But I think a century is a worthy goal to as a gauge that, hey, you're into cycling, you're good at cycling, and you're strong enough to do like, a half Ironman probably. In order to get to any of these steps, maybe you want to do biking more often, right? So for example, well, assuming that you have a bike, get bike. And then commute more with it. So for example, I got a bike, and now, in order to get more miles in, commute in SF. Just replace all of my car rides around the city with cycling. And then another one could be social, going on social rides with a best friend, right? And I like to make it quantitative. So for example, like at least once a week. I think it's important to assign some numbers to this so you actually, again, actionable but also measurable. And then finally, swim. Well, I suck at swimming. To be precise, I barely know how to swim / don't know how to swim. So I need to, first of all, learn And then the steps to actually learning how to swim, I'm probably overthinking this, but let's, list all this out, right? So research schools, and then sign up for classes. And then we've got, let's see, what else we got? Pass test or something like that, right? Oh, I forgot to add this part, which is my reason. So fitness plus bragging rights. There we go. Let's get into the color coding component. So I am going to identify the medium term components. So for example, or goals, which is to do a triathlon, bike, century, and then marathon's probably a medium term thing, right? Let's color this style dark orange. And then short term is like everything else, essentially. Well, imperfect, but you get the idea. Style, it's gonna be dark green. Cool. All right, so what I mean by long-term, medium-term, and short-term in terms of time span is that medium term is, let's say, within a year or so, right? Whereas short term is anywhere between like, a week or two, basically a 2-week sprint, to 3 months. So let's put that over here. Long term, lifetime achievement. This is gonna be medium term. So about a year. And then finally, we've got short term, 2 weeks to, let's say, 3 months, right? You could come up with your own definitions, but that's just my own, right? So now we have one complete scope of this particular goal. And let's go back up here to our actionable bucket list, which has got a whole bunch of other stuff, right? So for example, we've got, what if you wanted to start a company, right? Let's say $100 million valuation. You need to be, first of all, educated. So education is something that you can do in the short term, right? So whether it's reading books, going on YouTube, or talking to people, probably the best way to learn, right? These are all short-term things that you can do immediately. And then you've got product, hiring, and valuation exit strategy. I'll go into those in a bit, right? Product-wise, you need a solution. A product at the end of the day is a solution to a problem. For example, it's a solution, MVP. MVP stands for minimum viable product. This is basically the simplest product that you can test out whether or not you are solving a problem. At the end of the day is problem identification. You want to ask yourself a set of questions of who, what, how many, and what is the timing, right? These are all fundamental questions that you need to ask as a startup founder before you even dive into a particular solution for a problem. You have to identify the problem first. And then even more important than that is, why me, right? Why are you the solution? Why are you capable of bringing up the solution? Why nobody else, right? And then there's the team and hiring. How much of this can you actually do by yourself, right? This is pretty important because this will determine whether or not something is short term versus medium term, because hiring a team does take time. It's going to take months, right? That could be a project in itself. And then finally, how do you know that this startup is actually, or your company is even worth $100 million? In order to do that, you need valuation and perhaps also an exit strategy. Ways to determine valuation for a startup could be either you're selling it to an acquirer like Facebook. Facebook could buy you for $100 million. That would mean that you succeeded. Or you could do it by revenue, which is based on multiples of comparable companies in your industry multiplied by the annual recurrent revenue, or ARR, right? Assuming that the revenue multiple evaluation for your industry is 10x, you need to have an ARR of 10 million, recurrent revenue, annual revenue of 10 million in order to get there. The last one is funding, which is based on, let's say, venture capitalists and stuff like that, right? So in order to be valued at $100 million, you have to raise, let's say, $20 million at 20% stake. And even getting to that raise is going to take steps. No one's going to give you $20 million off the bat, or at least not most people, right? You have to go through, let's say, seed, which is a smaller check, 500K, typically Series A and then Series B, right? So multiple steps. You want to just break it all down. All right, so that's the startup example. We'll go through one more example here, which is, let's say, becoming an influencer, right? Which I actually still laugh at that term because, this is a personal goal of mine, because I just see it as education, I guess. But hey, we'll take society's, definition and term for now, at least. The reason why I want to go down this path is because for impact, community, and learning, my self-learning. As Seneca said, men learn as they teach, or people learn as they teach. In order to do that, the main categories I need to break down are, I need to be clear about my message and my mission, because I obviously need to know why I'm on this channel. What is the message? What is the vibe that I want to send out, right? What is it that I want to teach and say? So, for example, helping us become the best versions of ourselves, right? Or finding our purpose, or thriving in a complex world. These are all the things that really matter to me, and these are the ideas and tools I want to share with you. So mission and message. The next one is distribution channel, which is how I get my message across, right? So this is, for example, we've got YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. There's a lot more stuff out there, but those are like kind of the basic ones, probably Twitter as well. I don't really use that. And then there's monetization and financial sustainability, because if I want to continue, making these content, it needs to eventually get to a point where it is financially sustainable for me in the long run. So that could be, owning my own platform, let's say a website, a blog or newsletter, starting a consulting service, or let's say having, publishing an online mind mapping course. Let me know if you would ever sign up for that or pay for that stuff, right? Who knows? Just for YouTube, there could be metrics like subscribers, right? So 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100K, and finally 1 million, right? And I color coded these too. I think, short-term wise, I can probably reach 10K, pretty close to there. 100K is gonna be medium term, maybe within the next year or two. And then finally 1 million, that's pretty cool. What a number, right? In order to achieve any of these metrics, I actually like, putting these actionable things into what I can control, which is consistency, right? I can't control the amount of these externals, like how many people actually follow me. That's up to you. What I can do though is to crank out one good video a week for you guys. And in order to get there, I need to be cranking out one video out per week, period, I think. And I think that's both for my own consistency, for your, the reason why you would follow me, and also, honestly, to feed the freaking YouTube algorithm, apparently. Apparently they put creators who create consistently up on top, which makes sense, right? Because the platform will like to show people, creators that are constantly cranking out stuff. Like if you follow on a quiet channel that nobody's creating stuff on, you shouldn't. In order to get to one video a week, however, I need to create an entire pipeline of steps, right? In order to get any of these videos out, there is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 multi-step process here, where it goes from idea, research, writing, planning, film, edit, publish, and finally feedback. It's actually a loop if I want to create it. And each of these steps then has actionable and measurable goal in itself, right? Specifically. So for example, with idea, it could be coming up with 20 ideas, right? Because the worst thing is literally running out of ideas, which to be honest has never been a problem, but 20 ideas is pretty solid. Sending out a survey to 30 people, well, sometimes I'm in a research phase, right? So currently, for example, I'm working on a video about whether or not it makes sense to get an MBA in 2021. And rather than just talking about my own experiences, I reached out to 30 of my MBA friends from top programs. So creating a survey, sending out to people is another step for that. Writing, making an outline of 8 videos, that'll get me on a pretty good, trajectory or cadence to creating these things. Planning, scoping out 3 film sets. I don't know if you noticed, but some of my videos take place, especially when I'm talking about philosophy and personal lessons. I like to actually film them in outdoors or nature settings. In order to do that, I need to scope out different places, not just in my room, right? So it's like sending myself on scouting missions. Filming, well, I would like to get to a pipeline of 4 videos already set up and ready to go, so I'm not in a hurry and scrambling to produce content, because that's like the fastest way to create crappy content, guys. Editing, well, hiring an editor really speeds up my process, and fortunately I've done that. Publishing, always have 2 videos scheduled. Again, this goes back to consistency as well as not being crunch time. Finally, feedback. I want to be able to respond to your guys' comments. Thank you so much for them, by the way, within 2 days, because I think that's what you guys deserve. And then finally, checking analytics weekly to see where that drop off is, how can I improve my channel, responding and just like, gaining some or deriving some ideas from the questions that you guys have posed. That's what goes into it. These are all actionable steps on the road to becoming, quote unquote, an influencer. This is like, how I've made this entire, mind map of just 3 of these aspirations. There could be other examples like a good parent, writing a cookbook, opening a cafe, or even finding the perfect, or quote unquote perfect really, life partner. All of these things can actually be broken down into its individual steps. But ultimately, you want to list out the things that are actionable and controllable on your side and start working towards that. All right, I've been talking for a while. Hopefully this has been helpful. Definitely let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about this whole process. And I'll probably write an article or create a follow video of this entire funnel of goals, system end to end, so you're able to string all of this along. So far, I've made like 5 videos or 6 videos on this entire process. Check out all of those if you want in-depth explanations about each of these steps. But what we explained today, the actionable bucket list, is the beginning, right? It's understanding who we are, where we want to go, and creating the roadmap to get there. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys will have a great rest of the day, and talk to you soon. See ya.